All right, today we're going to dive into the life of one of the most influential and honestly controversial figures of the 20th century, Pope John Paul II. This is a man whose actions literally helped redraw the map of Europe, but whose legacy is, well, it's complicated. It's really as debated as any you'll find in modern history. So let's try and unpack the story of the man they called John Paul the Great.
So, picture this. It's April 2005. You're in St. Peter's Square, and it is absolutely packed. We're talking 500,000 people there for the funeral of Pope John Paul II. And then, out of this massive crowd, a chant starts to build. Santo subito. It gets louder and louder. It means sainthood now. This was just unheard of. It was this powerful, spontaneous demand from the people, right then and there, to make their leader a saint immediately. So that's the real question, isn't it? Who was this man who could inspire that kind of incredible devotion, but at the same time whose legacy is still so fiercely debated today? Was he a global hero who inspired millions, or was he a conservative leader who held the church back? Maybe he was both? To even start to get a handle on the man who would become Pope John Paul II, you really have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to a young boy in Poland named Karol Wojtyla.
Okay, so part one, the making of a leader, from Karol Wojtyla to priest. Look, the man the world eventually knew wasn't born a pope. He was forged, really, in the fires of some pretty immense personal tragedy and national chaos. The challenges he faced growing up in Poland, living under the shadow of both the Nazis and the communists. Those experiences were the very things that shaped his entire character and everything he came to believe. In this timeline, wow, it really lays it all out. His life was just defined by loss, right from the start. Just look at this. Between the ages of 9 and 21, he loses his mom, his older brother, and then his dad. By the time he's 21, he's completely alone. And all of this is happening during the brutal Nazi occupation of Poland. So to stay alive and avoid being deported to a camp, he's forced to work, first in a limestone quarry and then a chemical factory. And it's right in the middle of all that darkness, in 1942, that he makes this incredible choice. He joins a secret, underground seminary to become a priest.
And you really get a glimpse of the kind of man he was becoming, even back then. There are these incredible stories. During the war, he finds a 14-year-old Jewish girl named Edith Zierer who had just escaped a labor camp and collapsed. He didn't just walk by. He personally picked her up, carried her to a train, and stayed with her, literally saving her life. Then there's another story, where a family hiding a Jewish boy asked him to baptize the child, and Wojtyla refused. He insisted that the boy had to be raised in the Jewish faith of his parents. That tells you a lot about his moral compass, right from the get-go.
Okay, let's jump forward. We're now in 1978, and that same man, forged by all that hardship, is elected pope. Now you have to understand, this was a huge deal. He was the first non-Italian pope in more than 400 years. And he didn't just take on the role, he completely changed it. He was the one who really transformed the papacy into this truly global force we think of today.
So how did he do it? Well, mostly by getting on a plane. This number right here, 129. That's how many countries he visited. He became the most traveled world leader in history. It's said that more people saw him in person than any other human being ever. Think about that. He basically flipped the script. He didn't wait for the world to come to Rome. He took Rome to the world.
And believe me, these were not just sightseeing trips. Take his 1979 visit back to his home country of Poland. It was called a psychological earthquake. Poland was under the thumb of a communist government, and millions, literally millions, of Poles flooded the streets to see him. And he didn't call for an uprising. Instead, he talked about human dignity, about a spiritual revolution. And that visit, well, it's widely seen as the spark that lit the fire of the Solidarity movement, and it was a major catalyst for the eventual collapse of communism all across Eastern Europe.
All right, but that same incredible history-shaping power, well, it also casts some very long shadows. And we have to talk about this part of the story, too. For all the praise and all the love he received, his pontificate, which lasted almost 27 years, was also filled with some really deep and lasting controversy. And the criticism, it's important to note, came from all sides.
And this really sums up the dual nature of his legacy. On the one hand, you have the things he's praised for, his huge role in the fall of communism, his nonstop travel, his work to improve relations with other faiths, especially Judaism. But then there's the other side. He was heavily criticized, especially by progressives, for his very conservative stances on things like contraception and refusing to ordain women. But here's the twist. At the same time, some traditionalists thought he went too far with the modernizing reforms of Vatican II, so he was getting criticized from both the left and the right.
But out of all the criticisms, there is one that has without a doubt damaged his legacy more than any other: his handling of the clerical sex abuse crisis. Victims groups like SNAP, the survivors' network of those abused by priests, they say he just failed to respond properly as the crisis was exploding. More than that, they accuse him of actually getting in the way of investigations into predators, with the most famous example being the founder of the Legion of Christ, Father Marcial Maciel.
So, this all brings us right back to where we started, to that chant in St. Peter's Square, Santo Subito. The question is, how did that popular demand at his funeral actually become a reality? And how did it happen at a speed that was pretty much unheard of in modern history?
Well, the process was put on an incredible fast track. Let's break it down. First, his successor, Pope Benedict, did something huge. He completely waived the standard 5-year waiting period after death to even start the process. Then, they needed 2 approved miracles. The first was the healing of a French nun from Parkinson's disease. The second was the healing of a woman in Costa Rica from a brain aneurysm. Once those were approved, that was it. He was declared a saint in 2014. It was the fastest canonization in modern history. And here's the real kicker. The whole reason this fast-track process was even possible was because of reforms to the system that John Paul II himself had set up.
So, in the end, we're left with this massive question. Saint or sinner? Was he the world changer who helped bring down an empire? Or was he the leader who failed to confront his own institution's worst sins? How will history ultimately remember John Paul the Great? Maybe the real answer is that he can't be just one or the other. He wasn't simply a saint or a sinner, but a deeply complex man whose monumental impact, both for good and for bad, is something we're all still grappling with today.